Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. Nice to have you with us. It's a kind of a sunny, halfway warm winter day here in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. But it's a nice day to have an in-depth kind of conversation about something that's really important to us, and that is how to build a community. Because in the middle of all this change, it's really going to be central to how we get through the next few years. And to help us think and talk about that, we've got the members of our quartet, Gregg Braden. Hello, Gregg. Welcome. How are you
Hey,
today?
John, Frank, Penny, it's great to be with you. I have been home about 12 hours from cold, rainy, overcast San Diego, California. I'm now in our studio and even colder and and less sunny Santa Fe, New Mexico. But I'm excited to be with you all today.
Penny Kelly, nice to see you, my friend. How's it
Hi,
in
John.
Arlington, Michigan?
Yeah. Yeah, we're having a heat wave. Yesterday was 40. So today it's beautiful. I'm like the other day I was outside, I heard the winds of spring and I thought, "Ooh, this is early. Usually you don't hear that till mid-February." So anyway, hi Gregg. Hi Frank. Welcome, Frank. Glad to have you here. So
Yes,
Thanks, Penny. It's
and,
uh, it's an honor to.
yeah, Frank Jacob, nice to have you with us. Frank Jacob is with us. He comes from Germany, and he's been a friend for a long time of all three of us. And so, hi, Frank. Nice to have you with us.
Nice to be here, John. Hi, Penny. Thanks for the warm welcome. And Greg, it's an honor to be with you guys here and big shoes to fill here, with Kingsley gone. So I hope I can live up to the task. I'm coming to you, as you said, from the snow-clad mountains of the Bavarian Alps, just a few short hours from Vienna, which some of you might know in Austria, which I was at last weekend, which was actually a totally different climate, a lot warmer. But yeah, here I am in the
Well,
mountains.
good. Or nice. It's good to have all of you here, and we appreciate it. So let's go around the table like we do, and kind of just say what's on your mind and catch up. Penny, what you been thinking about?
oh my God, so many things. So I have a list. Okay. I think the first thing that I'm really aware of is the rate of change that Trump is bringing. And
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not sure that the people are going to be able to adjust fast enough to keep up with that rate of change. And I think, those changes, they've really been needed for a long time, but to have them happen all at once, that's a little bit, it's a lot to chew. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing, well, there's a couple other things. The fact that 75,000 to 80,000 children were found of the missing 300,000. I'm like, in 4 days, you found all those children, and the previous administration couldn't find them in 4 years. That says something so wonderful and so awful about what's happening to the children in our world. And I'm like, what are people thinking or doing with the children? I mean, that's just not okay if they're hurting anybody. So I'll leave that alone because I get really upset. But there's still 220,000 children missing. Where are they? So, and then the LA fires, Trump's remark that it looked like something hit it, but we're not going to talk about that. I'm like, oh, wow. The Ukraine war possibly coming to an end. I'm like, okay, come on. This is not time for those two roosters to start, circling one another in Russia and the US. Just end the stupid war. The sudden explanation of the drones as research and experimentation when the last administration was like, we don't know what those are. I'm like, oh, holy cow. That's just so, that's very upsetting. And a couple other things. Biden and friends had no comments about the chemical fog being sprayed. And I know people who are really ill because of that fog. And then the last thing is I see a financial storm coming, and it's like, uh-oh, okay, get ready. So I'll stop there. I mean, I could go on. I had a list a
yeah.
mile long.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah. Greg, what have you been thinking about?
Well, like Penny, I've got a list. We could do a whole program here. I'm just going to comment on the magnitude of change. The decisions that Trump has made are on one level reshaping our perceptions of the world order. There's another level where I'm very concerned about where a lot of those changes are taking us. I want to talk about that. But to the best of my knowledge, America now is no longer participating in the WHO, World Health Organization. Uh, we are going to pull out of NATO, and I'm not sure what will happen to NATO if that happens. He spoke at the World Economic Forum and was very clear about what America's role is going to be with the WEF. And he has pulled America out of the Paris Climate Accords. So all of those are reshaping economically and politically, and certainly the vision of where a lot of these organizations are going. We all know that when all the focus is happening on one place, there's usually something else going on that we're not looking at. I follow World Economic Forum pretty closely. They wrapped their January meeting it was held the 20th through the 24th. And it's interesting, the theme of the meeting this year, and I'm going to read this so I get it correct, is more collaboration for the intelligent age. That's very concerning because when they talk about collaboration, and I'll just half a step back, I used to not put much credence in anything going on with the WEF until the year 2019, when they signed a formalized agreement with the United Nations to implement many of their visions through the UN projects, including Sustainable Development Goals. That is concerning because America is legally bound. We have agreed contractually and legally to follow many, not all, but many of those principles. So they opened the WEF by saying they're 5 years away from meeting those goals, and they are so far behind, they're going to have to kick it into high gear. And the way they're going to do that is with technology. We're being driven toward a technocracy unlike anything we've ever seen. New administration is part of that. So those things have been on my mind. We'll talk about them some more, throughout. But those are the things I've been watching this week.
Yeah. Thank you. Good. Frank, what do you think?
You know, whatever Greg was just addressing is just an example, and also Penny, of the whirlwind pace of the events and changes going on. And I'm observing them from over here. Of course, it's a different political climate still, radically different in a lot of ways. But it's put me into a place of reflection. I don't know how to move. It's like there's just, what what to have an opinion about anymore because it's almost like we've arrived at this post-truth world, and yet there's a lot of truth coming out, but there's a lot of distortion. And I'm clear about one thing that, I've been talking about a lot is AI and the development of transhumanism, all of you as well, of course. And for me, it's clear that this year is going to be, and I sense it already, a milestone year in the implementation and integration of AI in society, whether you want it or not. And I think this is going to, scare a lot of people. It's going to empower a lot of people. And the idea of technocracy, isn't it funny how Elon Musk's grandfather was a founder of the Technocracy Party in Canada 100 years ago, and now here he is, right at the right-hand side, not even in an official role, more as a buddy role advisor to the so-called most powerful man in the world, who's actually taking matters into his hands to the point where you're thinking, are we still in a democracy, or is this just the new kingship that's moved into place? And what happened to the voice of the people, right? So you know that those who are behind Trump are jumping up and down and screaming, especially in the New Age scene and the ufology scene. And yet, on the other hand, there's all those people that voted against him or didn't like him who are thinking it's the end of the world. So you have those two parallels going on right now, and I think yeah, it's crazy times.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. Frank. It's hard to make sense. In fact, I was just talking to somebody this morning about it. Is just there are so many moving parts, and you don't know how to quantify or qualify, what you're listening to or watching anymore. And I was wondering if there were any kind of analogs, and I'd love to have a really solid source that could go back to the collapse of Atlantis and explain in detail how everybody acted and what they were doing and how they responded, because we're kind of flying blind here. And Penny, I agree with you in terms of the changes with this new administration. I have never, in my experience in this part of the world, never seen such a rather impressive, as a matter of fact, kind of all front assault to go after the present system. I mean, it's impressive. I was told this week of a friend of mine whose brother's just been accepted to be in the administration, and all he knew is that he had had a couple of conversations with two different people on the transition team, and at 11:30 at night, they sent him a email and said, be at training tomorrow morning, which was a Saturday, and next Tuesday and next Thursday all day. And he wakes up in the morning and finds the thing, and he runs down and to get to the place. And he's with a whole bunch of other people who have no idea why they're there. And somebody stands up and says, congratulations, you've been selected by President Trump to be a part of the administration. And they say, wow. And then, they go about and try to explain to them what area you're going to be in and so on, which is consistent. I mean, they all applied so that they know this is so. But the important thing is never before has anybody sat all of the new second and third and fourth level people coming in and said for 3 days, let me tell you who you are. Let me tell you what the agenda is. Let me tell you how you're going to work, and, and what are, I mean, it's really impressive. And Frank, it may seem confusing from your perspective over there, but from someone who sits here and has watched all of this before, you just say, this is magnificent in terms, I mean, you don't know where it's going to go, but in terms of being able to grab that amazing bureaucracy and boom, and get their attention and set them back on their feet. And this is kind of amazing what's going on. And so it'll be interesting to see where this all goes. So thank you all. It's time for our topic of today. And this topic is one that we have touched on in the past at various quartets, and in particularly in terms of trying to build a list of the required components of how you work your way through a time of high rates of change and uncertainty, like what we're going into, and what almost certainly will increase in the coming year or two. And when the system starts to fray and all of the supply chains don't work, and the government can't do what they say they were going to do, and so on, layered one on top of each other, then it generates a huge amount of uncertainty and tension, and there's and this problem is going to be an issue kind of writ large, a growing kind of proliferation across societies. We need to, if we're camped on the track and the train is coming downstream and it's blowing its whistle, then the solution is obvious. Let's move, get off of the track and go in another place. And in this particular case, it's we need to go build our own and our own kind of new game, if you will. I don't want to take the ball away from the other guys, but I would like to go play a different game. The other guys got all the money and the media and everything else, and they're trying to generate and drive as much fear into the system as possible. And you just really need community. You just really need some other like-minded support network of one sort or another that is of like-minded people who are each of which supporting the rest in their own way. And so our question today is, how do you build that community? How do you build community? We've had a number of questions that come in explicitly saying, what a great idea. How do we do it? Well, let's talk about that a little bit. And we can start with you, Penny, and then we'll do Gregg and Frank.
Okay, so if you want to, well, a simple, maybe not so cheap way is to have a bunch of children. That's a built-in community right there. And the family model is a pretty good model, but children grow up and go off and do other things. So, that's, I'm going to talk about a different kind of community, and in two different kinds, actually, to your point about physical and virtual. So what I have learned, I've tried to build community here at the farm. I had some wonderful experiences that were really tough lessons, but there has to be an interest, and you can build a community based on some kind of enlightening idea. But what we're dealing with right now is community that's based on some concerns about how are we going to make it. Like you said, you can't get there alone. We need one another. We do need one another. So there has to be that interest. People have to recognize that they do need one another. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, what are we trying to accomplish with this community? And it could be a lot of things. Is it security? Is it a sense of connection or belonging? Are you just looking for an alternate lifestyle? What about, are you there? Are you gathered to solve a problem? Like, how do we get electricity or whatever it is? And then there's revolution that creates all kinds of strange communities. And then there's religious, financial, governance goal, all sorts of goals. So what's the core thing? That has to be identified early on, or the community doesn't hang together. The second thing is you start with a small event. This is physical community now. You set a date, a time, a place, you put on the coffee, and you open the door. It's that simple. And you invite people because people always come for food. I don't care what the topic is. They're going to show up if there's food involved. What are we gathered for? Well, we want to talk about this, or what do you think about that? So that a light kind of agenda has to be there. And then you facilitate communication. So if people break up into arguments, you establish some rules, which I'm going to repeat in a minute, which is active listening. We're going to listen. We're not going to argue. We're going to listen so that we know where somebody's coming from, because what I've learned in my classes is that the person in the class who is the biggest pain in the neck usually has a huge gift for everybody else. So, if you know how to tame that lion, it becomes a huge benefit for everyone. So then allow people, to give their contact information, but don't demand that in the beginning. Plan a series of events or dinners so that it's not just seen as a one-off thing. And then once a community gets into a routine, you have to have 4 types of people that are kind of working together. One is you have to have a peacemaker, because there will be discussions that don't go very smoothly. You have to have a troubleshooter. You have to have a visionary, and you have to have an organizer. And if you have those 4 pieces, that community can become pretty stable pretty quickly. So then if you establish guidelines, ethics, rules, rules of behavior, rules for listening, not interrupting, and you can establish a climate of trust. That trust requires truthfulness and transparency. But if you can establish that, people will gravitate toward that almost as much as they gravitate toward food. So, and then keep a record of whatever expenses are associated with the events or the meetings. And then later you can ask, do we have a reason to formalize this? You know, do we want to become a village, an association, a nonprofit, a for-profit? What do we want to formalize this in some way? And you can have a community then that actually works and works well and is adjustable as it goes along. It flows with whatever is happening. So I'll stop there, but those are the basic steps that I have found work very well, and almost the same thing virtually. You set up an event, you invite people to come, you enjoy whoever shows up, and you start working together. And the goal is to plant seeds of community everywhere around the planet because they aren't local. And the people that are strong end up coming back again and again because they want that community. And then that radiates out to the 50 or 100 people they know. So it grows.
I have spent most of my adult life observing and exploring communities as a public speaker, invited into many communities at various stages, some in their infancy, some well established. So the idea of community can mean very different things. And Penny, I agree with you. I think the most successful communities are the communities that share not only a common vision, but a common purpose. There's a goal they're trying to achieve that they're working toward. First, I'm going to talk about physical communities where people are living not necessarily in a commune, although I've explored some of those as well, but in proximity to one another. My experience of physical communities is that it is still a challenge for humans to learn to work in close proximity without understanding how to deal with the physical attraction that humans feel toward other humans and sexuality. And it is the sexuality that actually blew up these communities. The one remaining is Sunrise Ranch, just outside of Loveland, Colorado. Beautiful, beautiful place, and really good people. So these are some things that we need to be aware of. What is the purpose of coming together? I had the opportunity in our very rural home, an hour from the nearest grocery store, 4 hours to the nearest airport in northern New Mexico. People would move to the remote location because they wanted to be remote and isolated and not engage. And what happened was builders came through from Chicago with a lot of money. And when they saw open land, they called it wasted land. And they had great visions for what they wanted to do for that wasted land. And what happened was, it was interesting, it forced those people who would typically not engage and are not social, but it forced them to come together as community to protect the very land and the values that they cherish, so that they didn't end up with a super highway and golf courses and condominiums on their land. And in doing that and working toward that common purpose, they got to know one another and they became friends. And there was an organic community that grew from that need to be able to preserve their way of life. So Penny, I think that's what you're talking about. It's a shared vision as well as a purpose. I like to see what works and what doesn't. And from my perspective, and Frank, you probably know more about this than I do. The most successful community that I've ever seen is in Italy, is in Damanhur, Italy. It was founded by a man named Falco back in the 70s. He passed in 2013, and that was the test. Can the community continue without the founder who had the vision? It is now called the Federation of Damanhur. It hosts between 600 and 1,000 full-time residents. They have their own currency. They have their own education system that the country of Italy now supports. They have apparently come to terms with the sexuality, and they've got some really good solutions to deal with that, to not deal with it, but to address it in a healthy way. They have their own charter, their own laws. Their schools are now accredited schools, and their children excel. So if you want to see anyone who's looking, I mean, we've just got a few minutes to talk about this here. If anyone wants to see a model that appears to have successfully worked out many of these issues from the 1972-73 to now, this is one of the longest running, most successful and largest communities that I've been invited to teach there. So I go there and teach, and then I have the opportunity to explore and talk to the people that are there. But I think when we talk about community, now we're talking about within the context of a changing world and of us needing skills to survive that we may not have personally developed within our own. So that's when we look to other people who may have that kind of knowledge and those kinds of skills. That can happen in a physical community. During the pandemics, we found it happens virtually, and a virtual community can be everything Penny said. You can have an agreed meeting place and a time. You can have a topic that you speak to. You can share knowledge, what you have learned. So we could go on and on from here, but there are so many different kinds of communities. I think what's important early on is to be very clear about what it is that you hope to achieve or attain. What is the purpose? So everybody's working towards a common purpose, and whether or not you have a hierarchical structure, someone who's in charge and delegates, or if it's an organic structure, which is what happened with us and the builders coming through. We didn't have a leader, no supreme leader. People would step up when they felt comfortable with their areas of expertise, and intuitively they would step back and others take the lead. And in that case, it worked really well. It worked really well. So I think it depends on the maturity, the emotional maturity, the psychological maturity of the individuals and the goals they hope to achieve. So I'll stop there, John. We can talk about more in the discussion.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Frank, what do you think?
It's funny you mentioned them, Greg.
I've got that book.
So yeah, it's quite a place. We've been there, there's some interesting artwork there, and it's quite the community. And you can learn a lot from spending time there, as we did when we went. In fact, they are running many marvelous projects there, like Music of the Plants, which is a technology you may have heard of, that we actually took some of that with us when we left, and we've used it, and it actually works. This idea of interacting with plants on a musical level, it's fascinating. Plants will play music. For those who are listening, to try it out is certainly worth it. It's a very bizarre experience, especially when you play it to gardeners who are busy hacking plants down all day long, and they hear it and they go, "Oh my God, the plants are conscious," right? So, but I think one of the things that has come up from both of yours input so far is, for me, something I made notes on. And I think that one of the most important things in terms of setting up community has to do with consciousness. What level of consciousness are people at? And there's many people that talk about advanced civilizations that are living, either they're ETs and they've solved this, or they're one of the more popular ones recently is the inner Earth societies, and that they've figured out a way so that they all can kind of live in total abundance, and there's no jobs as such, there's no currency as such, and you know, the models suggest that everyone's somehow taken care of. Just there's no everything somehow is provided, and the problem with it is, I think for the most part, there's really no working model we can look at. It's all this theoretical stuff, and it seems to be like there's nothing that we can prove to exist, show that it really does exist. And a lot of these utopian models, they kind of scare me a little bit because they move in the direction of, communist, socialist ideas that everyone's equal, and it doesn't work that leaves out this ideal that there's a natural tendency in our world to be rewarded for your effort, and that not all levels of expression and effort are the same. So the basic foundation of like what we in the Western world call capitalism if it were healthy and not dominated by greed and deception, would actually work because people would be rewarded for what they want. And those who don't want much, they just work within what they want to do. And there's a lot we could do in the community toward developing some kind of a structure that makes it gives a basis for existence. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's finding some kind of a, I think the scary word in Germany is universal basic income, where they want to take everyone and put them on an allowance every month. And then you got your house and you can afford so and so much food and stuff. But I don't think that's ever really going to satisfy at least the level of consciousness humanity's at now, like as you said, Penny, for the next 300 years. We need to find some way that's dignified for individuals to be able to, be to benefit from the additional value that they may, or that at least they perceive that they're bringing to the community before it'll be stable. Otherwise, you'll have jealousy, you'll have infighting, you'll have hierarchies building, and then there you are again, kind of where we are now, right? So. Yeah, those are some of the things I wrote down. But I think I when you said when you posed the question, John, I looked at it in a more general sense, and I made some notes because a lot of people don't understand, like, it's a very general word, community, right? So having been part of several different kinds of communities in the past 20, 25 years, I sort of broke it down into kind of four, or let's just say five if we add the virtual element, but four kinds of physical communities, which I think people should look at if they want to build a community. One of them would be, of course, the community led by a singular leader or a founder, right? Where there's a person who has an idea. And I think you mentioned that mountain, Greg, that was purchased. That was a spiritual leader who had donations and was able to purchase. That's kind of in that direction, that there is one kind of a focal point that people assemble around and build community around. There's also the kind of a community that's built by like-minded individuals who cohabitate in proximity. And I think that's what you were also talking about, John, you are developing that over there in Berkeley Springs, as far as I'm concerned, kind of a place where it's not a rigid structure. It's just there's this town and it's big enough for people to uh, spread out and small enough for them to get together and share ideas on a regular basis. And that's another kind of community, which I think is something people should or can consider in terms of a model. Another model is one that I was talking about a little bit at the end of my transition talk last November, where it's kind of a benefactor funded community which includes land, like a land investment. And I think the example I made was we have people like Bill Gates, for example, who are the largest landholders in the United States. Now imagine there was an enlightened Bill Gates. I don't, no insult intended there, Bill, but let's just say there's somebody who has a very more altruistic view of the world and they have a lot of money and they want to set aside an area where people can cohabitate. Well, that's another kind of a sort of a structure of a community that could be developed. And then, there's the most basic, I think, or attainable physical community that people can have without too much touchy-feely, if they're worried about that, is just your neighborhood-based preparedness community, where you get to know your neighbors. And I think again, that's sort of what I think we're getting at in the world right now we're in. It's becoming unstable. It's becoming dangerous in some areas where there's war. In other areas, we don't know really what's going to happen, what's going to come down. Are UFOs going to land? Are they going to be nice? Are they going to be evil? I mean, the whole spectrum of craziness is out there right now. So I think looking at those kind of four general communities as structures is a good starting point for what people would maybe visualize. Now, I could go into more detail on each one, but I've already talked for, I think, a good amount of time. So I'll pass the talking stick over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank all three of you. Let me just talk briefly about what we're trying to do here in Berkeley Springs as a practical example of trying to build community. First of all, Greg, I'd agree with you completely, and there has to be a purpose. And whether it's a physical community, whether it's built around some geography, or whether it's a virtual community, and I'll mention both things, both areas, There has to become some kind of an organizing idea, some vision, call it what you'd like, but this is not just nothing. What I can tell you is going forward into this period of uncertainty that there are quite a few kind of natural organizing ideas on which you can build around this. And here in our town, to take the physical example, we're just a small little town of 600 people, but there are some basic things that people are concerned about, and that gives you kind of the wedge into the system. And one of them is preparedness. And as some of you know, and I've mentioned here before, is that we decided that we were going to have a sponsor a preparedness day in the county. And I went down to the county commission to sell the thing. And I said, we're going to get 200 people out. And one of the commissioners said, oh, John, you're not going to be able to get 200 people there. Well, we got 400, you know. And so there was a lot of kind of latent interest in all of this. What we also did is that we decided that communications is very important in this kind of environment. And so we've raised some money so that we could give away handheld radios that anybody could use, and we're giving them away. We've given away about 100 of them, and we're giving away 100 radios to families. And so when we're finished, there'll be 200 families around this little town, or the whole county only has 16,000 people, but there'll be 200 families that'll have handheld radios, and we're putting into place the infrastructure, the repeaters and towers and other kinds of things, so that in an emergency they can all talk to each other. And so it's kind of one of those things where if you build it, they will come, as far as I'm concerned. Put up the flag, and if you provide an alternative and you keep it going, then and you make it interesting and fun, that will happen. What you're going to see is significant kind of new breakthrough kind of ideas about how to do collaboration and how to find like-minded people. And so there's a place in here for a virtual community. Now, I don't know exactly how that works, and maybe some people have some who are listening to this have some ideas, but there is a place. I mean, in my mind, I certainly see a place, and it's not right away, but where you can do projection holography, and you can project people into the room, a common room, and they can all see each other and so on. That's coming, but it's not here yet. But there are clear ways in which we are coming to the place where we're going to be able to find and collaborate with like-minded people who are kind of generally in our area. Now, I will suggest that you can't just do this virtually. I mean, you can kind of get there, but it makes all the difference in the world to get together and share food and talk and all of that. There's an energy. There is a trust that you build that you cannot build virtually. But you also need to bring it together. And Gregg and I, for instance, have talked about downstream the possibility of doing some 3 major conventions, different places in the world, where once you can bring people together, all so that they can meet each other, the ones that they've seen online and they've experienced online, and so that they can build this kind of larger fabric of support and interest in all of this. And let me just say again, there's going to be some new things here at the Arlington Institute. We're working on a project called TransitionNet, and it's about a global collaboration platform that the millions of people can all work together. Well, it's all based upon the fact that there are kind of local communities, chapters or whatever we call them, in different places around the world, all of which are brought together around the common objective, this common goal of trying to build a new world. And so there's, for us, we can see the beginning of the ability to try that you can start to reach out and engage people on the internet, specifically in terms of a particular objective, and that you can start to translate some of the kind of the social energy that comes from seeing each other individually into that kind of an environment. And I think that that's what's important. I think it's critically important in the next 2 years because we don't have much time and we need to start to bring people together very quickly.
Amen. Amen, brother.
I
Well,
like what you're doing, and John, in that you're kind of fusing both the physical presence with the online presence, and the I think one of the things that is big also right now is I talked about it, I think beforehand we were talking about AI, being encroaching in the world now in ways like it never has before. We don't need to be afraid of that technology. It is, after all, a man-made technology, and the problem I think is mainly if people that are in charge of the technology are keeping it from, being used in a way that helps people in community. And I love what we talked about when I was there in terms of you taking your books and digitizing them, creating an online database outside of the other ones that are out there. And I think everyone would love. I mean, I know how when I'm researching, if I have a go-to place that I can trust where I can find like the data that I'm looking for, I mean, that's just like that's one of the virtual forms of utopia for me. And I think we need to protect those and create those and make sure that they're there because someone has to carry forward the knowledge of humanity. That's, the books, for example, the digital book burning that's taking place now through censorship. And I hope it'll start to decline now with this new administration. But from the woke ideology, just deleting just swaths of information that is very valuable. We have to make sure this does not happen, and we have to hold on to the books. And if we can digitize them, all the better. Ideally, we have both. But we have to prevent the loss of a Library of Alexandria again, if we can, using the technology that we have. And I think again, the most important thing is here having a vision about it that's common for all of us. And I think you've done an amazing starting that. And I think it's a starting ground is the most important place for anybody starting a community, whether it's virtually or physically.
Well, thank you. Let me just rather quickly say that in terms of that AI capability, I'm working with Mike Adams, and he's got a new version of this large language model, which he's calling Enoch, and he's going to launch it on the 1st of March. And it'll be free to everybody, and it will have been trained on. He has brokered and acquired access to the largest database of almost all of the books printed in the world. That there is a tool that is going to allow us to be able to, we can co-opt essentially the AI revolution, and it'll allow us to use it that understands who we are, metaphysics, alternative health, alternative education, things, all of that. And it's like the Google of the future for the new world, right? And so that's really quite important, I think. And then what we're going to marry that and integrate it into our transition net collaboration platform so that it increases the metabolism of the whole system, and it helps you find people and things and so on. And so it's a really screaming kind of vector going toward a new world.
Well, John, what you and Frank are both talking about, it's already happening. I don't know if you guys, how closely you followed the release of DeepSeek this last week, the Chinese search algorithm and the AI. There was a very interesting experiment that was done online, and you can see the video of this where it's open access, and the question was posed to the AI DeepSeek, what leaders have killed the most people in the world? And the AI came back with two leaders, and both of them were Chinese, Genghis Khan and another one. So
Genghis Khan is not Chinese.
Well, this is what Asian. This is what came back, but here's
Careful
what happened.
Genghis Khan, right?
Here's the reason I'm saying this, because it came back and then the AI corrected, it self-corrected to deny that it had ever said that, and began launching into a new story. And for young people that are being conditioned to accept AI, like the last generation accepted Wikipedia, is fact, the history is being rewritten. And it is being rewritten in a way that supports very specific narratives. And I think that's important for us to recognize this. I mean, this isn't like, 5 years down the road. It's happening right now. And it's been happening. It's just more pronounced now because the AI is allowing it to happen probably faster.
I just want to add a footnote to what you said, John. I think the physical gathering, the being able to see, to talk face to face with people is really key. And if an example would be the people who got wiped out in Western North Carolina aren't going to be helped by all their connections in Texas or in South America or Europe, and ditto for the same same issue in the LA fires. They aren't going to be helped by somebody in Ohio who happens to be of like mind. There needs to be groups of people who know who's around, what do they think, what are they willing to work for. You only get that face to face.
Yeah, but you're going to get this now. I'd argue because there's not been a need for it in the past, per
That's
se.
true.
I mean, and now there's an emergent need. People understand this. Just because folks like us sit around and talk about it in this way, and they understand that there's a need for community, and so now you're going to generate people trying to think about and bring together. We're going to do a new page on our website on the Arlington Institute dedicated to helping people build community. Here are the kind of different kind of resources. Here's the kind of stuff that's going on.
Nice.
John, just I know this is a very brief conversation we've had today, and people were asking specifically about community. Before she passed, I had the opportunity to present and work with Barbara Marx Hubbard over the years. And one of the things that Barbara developed was a vocational wheel for community. And we use these in real time. We'd bring diverse groups of people together. And in this wheel, it was broken into pie sections where people would identify what it was that they could bring to the table. And then the communities would be based upon, certain number of people that had, writing skills or cooking skills or, working with farm animals or whatever. And it really helped to flesh out the needs of the community. And it really helped to identify where there might be a weakness in a community that could be filled. And I would invite people to check out the work of Barbara Marx Hubbard and the vocational wheel that she had created.
Well, we'll continue to come back and talk about this and other aspects of the practical kind of requirements of going into this new world and preparing for this new world in the upcoming episodes. But thank you all right now for this conversation, and thank all of you who are viewers and listeners today. We really appreciate this, and we appreciate you sending comments and questions to us. Quartet is a problem.
Did we lose John?
I didn't know if it was on his end or my end.
I had the same thought. I hear you, Greg. Frank?
Okay. I've got a red light in my broadband on my router, but it seems to be working. I think we may have lost John.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think it's clear in what is it, 1.5 to almost 2 hours that we can't cover as topic as complex as community. But I think it's been very interesting to hear all of your perspectives, and I love the way you started, Penny, because it just like here I had this kind of overview, like general overview and prepared, and then you brought it down to the real like cookies and tea will draw them to your house, and it's like it's so true.
Yeah.
I can remember when I lived in Salzburg for a while. I had the pleasure of living there, and I started to just kind of show movies on a particular movie night. We would start with movies like, I don't know, like Thrive or something like that or whatever, and you'd bring people over and you'd watch the movie, and afterward you'd have the most animated discussions, and that was a very, very simple form of community, but it's speaks exactly to what you were talking about. They let their guard down. There's food.
Yep.
and everything kind of like starts to evolve from there, right?
Yeah. And if it's
Well-
not going to, you know that very soon. If it does, it moves typically very quickly.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, this is community right here. We're building a community right here between the
Yeah.
four of us.
Yeah.
that's true.
John's always had a vision that that maybe the community we're talking about would be focused in Berkeley Springs.
Well, I mean, it's a great little place, and I'm all for. I like that idea. Actually, that model to me appeals the most in terms of like going physically to a place and living there. I've been privy to some communities like the one I described in the beginning, where there's like a single leader, and you end up in kind of a weird like cult-like thing. Almost
Exactly. That
every
was the word
time.
I was going to use. It's like
You know,
a cult.
isn't
It's a
it?
cult-like
Right?
thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't we, since we've lost John, so I'm just going to pretend I'm John and say this whole thing is brought to you by Transition Talks, which is located in a little town called Berkeley Springs, about 100 miles from Washington, D.C., and run by John Peterson, who has been committed to making a different world from the beginning. So thank you all for listening. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Take
Thank you
care.
all. I love you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.